Welcome to Mobi. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'm just here to let you know what Mobi is, the platform that you're on, marketing opportunities in business and entertainment. We are nearing 30 years with our brand and our conference series, the Mobi Symposium. And what I guess our claim to fame or our competitive advantage is that we have a culture that says people that look just like us are the most powerful people, the most valuable people in the room. That our creativity drives everything in American culture, from food. Yes, the platform that you're on, marketing opportunities. Okay, so it's technology, guys. We've all been on these Zooms before. So just in case you didn't hear at the beginning, this is Mobi, Marketing Opportunities in Business and Entertainment. It's a conference series and a brand because it's a brand that represents a culture of people, of professional African Americans who decided almost 30 years ago that we would band together, sports, entertainment, technology. We would have those categories converge to make sure that we were cutting a piece of pie for people that looked like us. We counted about $200 million in business between people who met at Mobi, and it committed to find a way to make things work, both for people that were entrepreneurs, as well as corporate executives who really needed that extra oomph to make their campaigns accelerate. And even today, Mobi Accelerates is one of the hashtags used around our brand and conference series. In COVID, just a year ago, and it's been a year ago, we decided that we weren't going to do our national conference and pivoted into what we call Mobi Mondays. And we had some Mobi Tuesdays and we had some Mobi specials. And now we're just on a roll because our audience, people want this information, marketing opportunities in business and entertainment. The question is, where are those opportunities? And what Mobi's done with a series of these panels every Monday and some Tuesdays, et cetera, is really opened up the opportunities, the conversation, gives people a pathway for success. So tonight, it's my pleasure to do a couple of things. The name of this panel is Ride or Die. I'm just so excited about that. And that's DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. But before we get started, because I started as a salesperson, an ad salesperson in my 20s, selling a small publication that then grew from a national magazine that competed with Black Enterprise. And at 34 years old, I started a marketing firm that launched Mobi. I'm just going to pay tribute to some sisters that I love and that I admire. And the first one, and because every day this week, we will be doing this Women in Advertising in honor of Women's History Month. And I really want to pay tribute to a smart gentleman that is with our company, Dani Jackson. He is our brand strategist for Mobi. And this was his idea. And the idea of the people that work with him as our advisors for Mobi to not only do a day of Women in Advertising, but to do an entire week. So every day this week, you'll be able to tune in at this time of day and see some incredible conversations, some beautiful women, mostly Black women, that are doing their thing at the top of their game. And so today, Ronetta McCann is the woman that I want to make sure that you know. Renetta McCann is an amazing sister, and some of the adjectives that we've been using tonight in preparing to introduce the program have been charismatic, down to earth, smart, and I would say a power player. Once I heard her do a presentation, and her presentation was power and privilege. The room was all white, and she really talked about culture. And it is our culture, our Black culture, that drives almost everything. And in her presentation, she said, culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. So this is, and I could just see myself going into an ad agency making that pitch, right? Where people that look like they're God because they have all the budget in the world and you're pitching to them and they've got the strategy and they don't think you fit because you're too Black or you're too down to earth, or you too homey, right? Or not the kind of homey, or maybe you're too proper, not the kind of homey they'd like to see, right? Mm-hmm. And so when she said that, I was totally inspired. Ronetta McCann is at the Publicis, and she She has been she's the vice president of inclusion. She is has been the chief talent officer at Leo Burnett, where she leads the agency's people and culture department with oversight of the agency's U.S. recruitment training, benefits, and talent development. And she began her career when I met her. And actually, we're born on the same day. So it makes me feel smarter just knowing that. I knew her when she was at Leo Burnett, and she knew me while I was building my companies and my brands. And every time I met her, she was able to give a word of encouragement. As CEO of Starcom Media Vest Group worldwide, can you imagine us? Her peers like, oh my God, that woman is CEO of Starcom. She's been chief of talent officer. She's been an executive coach and head of organizational change. She came out of Leo Burnett and came back in. She has a master's degree in learning and organizational change from Northwestern University, where she also became an adjunct faculty member in 2016. She was named one of the top 100 most powerful women by Forbes and Women to Watch by both Fortune and the Wall Street Journal. She serves as honorary trustee for the Anaconda School and is a former board meeting of Chicago Public Media. And she was I can just go on, but Publicis is no small thing. It is an international company with some of the leading brands that I grew up with that are under their rubric. Renetta McCann is a change agent. She's a mentor. She is a guiding light for those of us in the industry working to make a difference in the industry. And so tonight, I am so happy to put her name on your radar. I hope that you'll Google her. I hope that you'll honor her. I hope you'll have your children do book reports on her. This is how great she is. And she is a living legend, and she's younger than me. But she's not an old lady in an old book somewhere. She walks among us, and her spirit drives us. Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it over to Angela Turner. Let's give Renetta McCann a round of applause. Yes, sister, you inspire us. Yes. Now it's my pleasure, and I'm going to sign off now because I am actually not on this panel. I'm going to sign off and introduce you to the person leading the panel. And she is, again, she's a superstar. We have nothing but superstars at MOBE. And this Angela Turner is amazing. She's Senior Vice President of Marketing and PR with REVOLT Media TV, and one of the few Black-owned content, a few Black-owned content platforms owned by Sean Diddy Combs, the Sean Diddy Combs, with a lens and perspective rooted in hip hop for culture by culture, delivering content across all platforms, including linear, digital, and social. She has been developing and executing strategic marketing plans to drive demand, carriage, and new system launches for REVOLT. Angela has been leading the effort with exciting existing partners like AT&T, Charter Spectrum, Comcast, Xfinity, and other platforms, as well as conceiving and executing new opportunities to drive consumer engagement and brand awareness. Angela is also charged with building REVOLT's unapologetic brand value and trade and industry organizations, and recently added PR oversight responsibilities. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to sign off and leave it in the capable hands of Angela B. Turner.
Oh, thank you, Yvette. And what a great, great tribute to Renetta. It's so deserving and such a great way for us to start this discussion with these exceptional lady leaders. I am so excited and so honored and so humbled to just be part of this space with MOBE Monday. So I hope all of you guys joining us and tuning in on Facebook Live will make a commitment to join MOBE every day this week when they are honoring and talking to women in advertising all week long. So without further ado, let's jump into this RIDE or DEI discussion. Dani, only because I'm gonna go alphabetical because I had that done to me and my name is A. So I'm gonna go alphabetical. Dani, if you could please just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and let's add a third piece to that introduction. Give us a little context of how you started in DE&I and why it matters to you.
Yeah. So as was said, my name is Dani Jackson-Smith, and I'm currently a VP in multicultural client marketing at Edelman, which is a international PR firm with humble roots in Chicago. And my background, my history in this industry is production. So up until December, my entire career has been in production. But in 2019, I got the opportunity to officially step into a DEI stewardship role at Edelman. And with my coming into this industry through the 4A's MAPE program, Multicultural Advertising Intern Program, being a part of ad color boards, and just being very active, and I have an active dog apparently too in the middle of this. That's how I got into, it started as my lived experience and my passion, and that turned into my career.
Thank you so much. Ericka, can I toss it to you and then we'll jump into the discussion and roundtable?
Sure. So I'm Ericka Riggs. I am now serving as the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Omnicom Specialty Marketing Group. When we talk about journey, I have a very nonlinear journey. I was a hairstylist for many years. It allowed me to meet Sean Diddy Combs, Andre Harrell, Russell Simmons, and so many countless other icons in that industry. And in doing so, started a career in the music industry. Loved that. Napster had a big impact on changing what that looked like. And so I met a young lady by the name of Valerie Graves. Valerie was going over to Uniworld as their Chief Creative Officer. I was ready to leave and exit music because music, like I said, was changing because of Napster, and ended up at Uniworld Group. And it was amazing. It was like I'd gone to Howard University. When I first got out of high school, I went to Howard, and it was that feeling. I found my tribe there. So many smart people who look like me. So being able to do a job there without bringing my Blackness or wearing my Blackness is in defense, right, was an amazing opportunity. So I fell in love with the advertising industry, working there at Uniworld. And I would say that I've been a ride or die DEI all my life. I've always stood up for underrepresented. I've always stood up for myself. I'm the middle child, and I have a younger sister and an older sister. And I've just always found myself, as we would move throughout the country, as somebody who never really understood why people wanted to have the opportunity to make other people feel bad. And you just weren't going to do that. So for me, sticking up, making sure, raising my hand, making sure that everything was equitable for everyone was always so this was a very natural transition into the D&I space.
So Ericka, you just used D&I, and our panel is called Ride or Die DEI. Let's jump right in, ladies, and I'm going to ask you if you would talk us through the important differences and why diversity, equity, and inclusion must live and be pushed together. Ericka, I'll go with you first, if you don't mind, and then Dani, please just jump in and let's give this a discussion. And please, throughout, we welcome any questions. Just drop them in the chat. They're being monitored, and we're glad to pull them out and include them in our discussion. Ericka?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit, right? We talked about how diversity, equity, and inclusion they are a trio. And the reason why they were a trio, because for so long it was just diversity and inclusion. And what we do know is, and Dani definitely does it much more justice than I do, but diversity, inclusion, right? Having a different opinion, having different points of view, having different stories in a room, that's great. In inclusion is to allow those different points of view and those different stories to be heard, to be an influence, to then drive strategies. But equity is what allows for everybody in that room to have a say-so that allows a more equitable distribution of that information, if you will, or an opportunity that we are all met at the point of which we need to be met in order to be able to elevate where we need to be elevated. And so oftentimes that doesn't happen because it's just like we were talking the other day, and I love that. I love the visual where they say there's a house on the block that's on fire. Should the firemen come and put out all the houses, tend to all the houses, or should they go and just tend to the house that's on fire, right? To me, that is what I mean by equity. Being able to help people who need that help and need that support, and then bring them up to the point that makes them also a viable and effective member of the team. And that is something we didn't see before when we were only focusing on the diversity and inclusion piece.
Thank you for that. Dani, can you please share with the group, you told Ericka and I an amazing story from your days at Columbia University. Can I ask you to share that here?
Yeah, when I first, actually it was Columbia College here in Chicago, when I first, worked there as a, adjunct professor, I was in a training and we were going through, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for me at that time, I had not heard equity utilized in the space. And so I kept saying, like, what do you mean, like money? Like, what do you mean by like an equitable experience? Because the only time I was talking about equity was like the equity in my home or the equity in like, from a business standpoint. But post that, able to really key in on that difference between equality and equity, right? And so looking at, if I was giving away Jordans to everyone, right? And I said, okay, everybody is going to get a pair of Jordans. Everyone's going to get a size 10 pair of Jordans. Well, everybody doesn't wear a size 10, and so if you need a size 2 in order to run most efficiently, but I've given you a 10, I've actually set you back because now you have to go through a variety of different steps to get across the finish line, right? Or to hit the goal. And so equality is providing or trying to get the exact same, or being able to say, well, I provided the same resources to everyone without taking into account where they're coming from, what's their background, and what is actually needed to get everybody up to the level playing field. And so I think that's a good way for us to really dive into how are we creating equitable experiences and understand the nuances that each of our parties may bring to the table.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how each of you ladies guide your companies and provide best practices to your clients, especially in this moment, right? Post George Floyd, post the reckoning and the awakening and the discussions of the need for DE&I. So Dani, if I can go to you first this time, and then Ericka, if you can just jump in and we'll have a discussion about that.
Yeah, I think, for me, I specifically lead diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Chicago office. And I'm grateful to be a part of a tribe, right? Of a Edelman tribe that is focused on what is happening in the world around trust, right? What is the relationship between the public? What is the relationship between employers? And what are the expectations? And in 2020, and since that, since the murder of George Floyd, we have been able to, we've already had a multicultural department in place for the last 20 years, but being able to provide a more direct service to our clients that helps navigate where we are in the world, right? And so where that usually starts is understanding, how is your house in order? Is your house in order? And if it's not, which there is no such thing as perfection, you want to start there, right? To actually look at, are we diverse? Are we creating equitable experiences? Are we inclusive? Do people here actually feel that they belong? And if there isn't a sense of internal trust, then you really need to address that. We've seen brands that have come out in 2020 and publicly said, we are for the Black community. We are for, ending and annihilating systemic racism, just for some of their employees to say, yeah, well, we don't see that internally, right? So you really want to get your house in order. And it's almost like they say, like, you can't get ready to go to church. It's like, you just go, right? So don't wait to see, it's not great to just wait and see what everybody else does, right? And the worst thing to do is to say nothing, because there is an expectation from the public that you are providing solutions for the communities that you serve. And when you are silent, you are saying everything, right? You are saying that I'm not engaged, or I don't find this a valuable conversation. And we saw in 2020, and I think we'll continue to see, the public rebel against that. The public is paying attention, the streets are watching, like literally, to understand where's your money going? How are you showing up for your employees? How are you showing up for the communities that you say you serve? And how are you creating an authentic impact there? And the last bit of it is, how are you changing your industry? I think as we look at where companies are, whether that's a personal brand or a major brand, everyone's on a different space in the journey. And that leans into, like, you can't get ready to go to church. You have to do something, right? And so if your step is a first step, acknowledge that and say, you know what? We haven't been doing X in the past. We're at the beginning of our journey, but here's what we're committing to doing, and making sure that you follow up on that commitment, right? So it's not just speaking, it's doing as well. So a lot of the work that we've been doing in the counseling lives in those spaces. Like, who are you? What's your narrative? Where do you want to position yourself in this conversation authentically? Like, don't go from 0 to 100. Like, understand where you actually have an authentic voice and where you can actually create impact. And I think that's a big part of it, where people are trying to measure, like, are you more than your words?
Thank you. Ericka?
Yeah. And Dani, that's great. You hit on a lot of really great points. My real approach is not, I think it's very non-traditional, because I don't come from the HR side, which is where DE&I has typically lived. And I'm really under the impression that there is a conflict with DE&I living in HR. I believe that HR and DE&I can partner, because I believe HR has the tools, right? But so much, the real big part of DE&I is being able to influence people, educate people, and you influence them through education. You influence them to have conversations. That's through trainings. You influence them by being intentional and showing them where some of those gaps exist. And to Dani's point, you have to observe that, right? You have to be able to look at where are some of those gaps. And it's a very striated approach, because it's not a one-fits-all approach. And in doing that, people will say everyone already knew, right? And you are really like that person who has to come in and say, hey, listen, it's not me, it's not you, it's all of us that are going to have to come together and recognize if this is a business proposition, first of all, we've tried the empathy and we can't get rid of that empathetic approach. But now let's look at this business approach. Let's look at where we are. And so when I say it's a striated approach, because I can be on the inside helping to challenge the systems that exist there, to be able to say, these are some of the things that we need to really look at because this isn't working. We're seeing that there's bias in your hiring. So you've got HR, right? HR is doing recruiting. HR is doing all types of what they think are opportunities for their people to stay, but yet none of that's working. Okay, so then I have to then be able to have that conversation with the CEO that this is what maybe HR should think about changing, because you have to approach it that way, because everyone is good intentioned. They all feel like they're good intentioned. So the approaches are very different sometimes depending on who you're dealing with. That's one. The other thing is, if we don't have people out in the streets, if we don't have trade associations, if we don't have people knocking on the doors, holding us accountable, holding the CEOs accountable, but I will say that we work, that type of energy that we get when people are marching and when people are, just not being satisfied and they're vocal, that helps us. Those trade wins help us to continue to pressure inside. So I hear a lot of times people say, what are DE&I people doing? Well, first of all, we cannot do it by ourselves. We didn't create it by ourselves. We're trying to be inside so we can now say, okay, you said that you were going to give $10 million to help underrepresented communities. Well, I'm here to help you identify who some of those unidentified, underrepresented populations are and give you context, because so much is lost in the context, right? If you don't have context, if you don't understand Black history or not just even Black history, all histories, because we are representing all of these different communities, from multi-generational to LGBTQ to Asian Americans and Hispanic Americans. So we are really looking at how to be allies to those different communities that come under our purview as DE&I specialists. We're also looking at being a part of that pitch, the business pitch, so that, because now brands are saying, hey, I need to know, Angela Turner, what is REVOLT doing from a DE&I perspective before I put my money over there? So I'm at that table. So I wear a lot of hats. I'm at a lot of tables. I talk to people from 9 to 5. I'm talking internally, but from after that, I'm with my MOBE family. Why am I with my MOBE family? Is because I'm networking. I'm finding out what Dani's doing. I'm finding out what you're doing, so that it's going to take the whole village to really make some change. And I think the change will come. We've seen it in history before. The 60s and the 70s, there was a proliferation of advancement. And then we saw that kind of level off. And the reason why we saw that level off, a lot of experts talk about it, but Dr. Jason Chambers speaks about it really well in his book, Madison Avenue. And it's because we took our eye off the prize. We stopped pressuring companies. We thought we had it made. And who's the we? The we can be any underrepresented population. You just insert that in there. Because what happens is power and the status quo continued to want more of that power. And once they have the power, that's the narrative, unfortunately. So we have to make sure that we keep ourselves in that narrative.
So of course we are getting a lot of questions, ladies, and I do want to give them to you and get your thoughts so we can provide a little feedback for those who are asking. But I do want to just expand on a thought, Dani, that both you and Ericka shared, and that's about houses being in order and accountability, right? And it is going to lead us into this next question about priorities at companies and how we can advocate internally in companies. But I do want to share, it's important to not just be satisfied with a seat at the table. A seat at the table is diversity. Equity and inclusion are being counted on, being responsible, having value, being needed, being included are important pieces of DE&I. So throughout this panel, you guys will hear us talk a lot about DE&I because they do need to go together. So here's a couple of questions that we have. The first one is from an attendant. who lives in the Midwest, and she is asking if either of you have seen the differences in regions, Midwest and East Coast specifically, on DE&I practices, principles regionally.
For me, I work on the East Coast, right? So I'm going to say, and my partner typically is the West Coast. So in terms of the approach, yes, there are differences, right? There are definitely some salient difference, but I think the mission and where we're trying to be, and let me just use what I'm seeing. So last night were the Golden Globes, and we talked about this because there was no representation on the foreign press, right? And those are the people who actually vote on those films and all those shows, right? And then you had a couple of years ago, you had Oscars So White. So what's happening on the West Coast is in those big arenas and those very public types of opportunities, there is this opportunity to see where diversity doesn't live. Okay. So you're getting the message out from the West Coast. I haven't delved into it enough to know what they're doing differently within those corporations, but definitely it helps to have that vocal, for them to be vocal and have that press, right? I think just because of who we are on the East Coast, with there being a proliferation of African Americans and other communities that tend to be more, I'm not going to say more, but who are highly politically involved. I'm in the Washington, D.C. area, right? Chicago, Atlanta, Philadelphia. Those are hubs of African Americans who are highly educated, typically have a more a higher demographic in terms of salary and education. And with those communities, you do see a lot more demand in different ways. You see more, as a matter of fact, you see more people sitting around the tables in those communities. And they also have other organizations that they are strongly committed to. And so they're more aware. There's an awareness. And I keep saying more, and I don't want to say that because, again, I'm not in the Midwest. So I'm just going to say I do see a lot of awareness there. Once there's more awareness in situations, oftentimes there's a lot of more intention.
Dani, who is in the Midwest, please give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I am in the Midwest, but I think it's tough sometimes when you're from a city because city life. But I think serving clients that are in the Midwest as well as across the nation, I see a lot of the same issues, right? Again, different companies will be on different levels in their journey, but we have to continue to challenge the status quo, and we have to continue to challenge the ways that diversity, equity, and inclusion have been defined, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's easier to champion the fact that you have reached gender equality when you still haven't accomplished racial and ethnic diversity or equity within your company, right?
Or racial equality, right?
Yeah.
Gender and age.
Exactly. And so there are different opportunities within all of our sectors. I think every sector has an issue in terms of racial equity, racial representation, whether it's tech, whether it's in the medical field, whether it's in our own industry in terms of communications. Across the board, we see that there is a need for more diversity and then also equity and making sure that you're creating an inclusive environment where people feel that they belong. So it's very hard for me to say, any particular region is getting it right, because I think overall there is a lot of room. I mean, there's a lot of, not even just room, but it's mandatory that we more proactively move the needle forward, right? That we move with intentionality. And I think, Angela, to the point that you made before, and also I think we all been saying this, it's an ecosystem, right? Yeah. So we don't operate in a bubble. because people were out marching in 2020, diversity, equity, and inclusion is at the forefront of our conversations. And so it is painful to think that someone, not even just, I mean, George Floyd as one singular person, but we've seen many people continue to lose their lives since then. We've also seen discrimination and brutality in the Asian American communities. We've seen just tragic things happening, and it's very sad to say that you have to have something traumatic like this happen to move people and to move business. But what my hope is as was said earlier, is that we keep our eyes on the prize, right? We keep our eyes on the fact that when we speak up, when we speak with our dollars, when we speak with our time and our eyes, that is what keeps corporate in a positive relationship with us, right? So, you know, these are not just like ghost entities floating over us. You know what I mean? Like, there is a relationship here. And when we say, you know what, we will not stand for, and I say we as a people, when we as like the general public make it clear that what we won't stand for in terms of discrimination or, you know, a company supporting things that lean into systemic racism or any other type of discrimination, we are creating change. And I think all of us on, you know, this panel and on the panels you'll see this week, we have the power to continue that change, you know, because it is an ecosystem.
Yeah.
What we're really talking about are human rights. And I know that both of you ladies, as we talked this weekend, we wanted to touch on that. But before we go there, because we are talking about keeping our eyes on the prize and being authentic and how we show up in our companies and ask and take part in them being the best, we have a question and I want to grab it real quick. It says, keeping it real, DE&I is not a priority at most companies, even when they say it is. How do you advocate internally in a way that is meaningful and doesn't paint you in a way as that Black person? Mm-hmm. And you did that quote right as I was reading it, Dani. So if you would grab that first, and then Ericka, please just chime in if you would.
I think it's vital to lean into to know your purpose and understand that whether your purpose is aligned with where you are, right? I mean, I think hands down, you have to rock that job, right? You gotta like do your job and be amazing at it. So that never comes into question, because I have heard, I mean, and I've had, you know, experiences throughout my career journey where there was the questioning, you know, sometimes you can be heavily involved in the DEI space, volunteering, and not even feel that that's being acknowledged within your company. And so I think number one is staying true to who you are, and doing that job that you were hired to do at the tip top of what it is that you were hired to do. And you know what the company is when you get there. You should also be interviewing that company to see if it's a good fit. But once you're in that space and you are advocating for change, I think this is also where your sponsors and your allies come into place, right? Making sure that you have people around you that are also of like mind to help move that needle forward. And in this time specifically, because so many companies have made commitments, they've already given you the blueprint on what you can hold them accountable for. I think if you were to look back like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, the commitments were very loose and light. But 2020 made people have to get a lot more granular with what their commitments are. And now you have actually something to go back to and say, hey, how are we doing in this area? You know, and I think that that's a good way to start the conversation. And I think if a company is trying to paint you in as that Black person, look, I don't think I can give you a one-shot answer, because it's going to depend on what your career trajectory is. And I hate to say it, like sometimes there's a level of BS that you deal with because you see a greater goal. you know, but I don't, in my own personal life, I don't liken that to be any different than, you know, the things that my grandparents went through in their struggle, the things that, you know, I'm not out in the street marching every day for the benefits that we're receiving. So I feel like it's my job on the inside of this to ensure that I'm speaking up and that I'm providing some access, right? And I always say keep dating also. Like if the company that you are is really not a diverse, equitable, and inclusive space, then I think they're telling you that maybe you and that company are not in alignment. So I think some of the work has to happen internal so that, you know, this is the threshold within which I can work within. I have a goal. I want to see this company succeed. But if we continue to not be aligned and we're going in opposite directions, I don't think you can ignore that.
Thank you.
You know, I hear that question, and that question kind of, it propels me in a lot of different interesting ways. It challenges me, it saddens me, and at the same time, it makes me a little pissed off. And I'll tell you why. To your point, our ancestors have gone through far more by staying optimistic, by fighting, by knowing in their very spirit that they are more excellent and greater than this world will ever allow them to be, right? So who am I? Who am I and who are they to ever stop me? So as long as there is breath in my body, I am going to fight for that which I know. See, I already know we're fabulous. I already know the excellence. I grew up in it. I'm steeped in it. I'm dipped in it, and I come from it. And so do all of us. Okay. So I'm not really there for you to necessarily like me. I'm fighting for you to move out of the way and give everyone equal access to the top. So when I go there and I work as hard and I do, and I bring my best self, because I'm at the other, it saddens me sometimes because people can take that thinking and it can be so heavy that it wears them down where they never ever show up for themselves. Okay. I will have to say that I have been in so many different environments where everyone says, you know, if you read the room, I shouldn't be there. I take over that room because I show up unapologetic. I know everyone doesn't have that opportunity. I come from that. That's who my mom and my dad are. That's who we have all, that's the only thing that I know to be. And so there's that privilege that I have. There's that fight that's innate in me. So I fight for everybody that I feel is underrepresented, but I'm not fighting for you to like me. I'm not fighting for you to give me a piece of paper that says, finally, you are official. That's not what I'm fighting for. So when you're not fighting to be liked, you're just fighting, I need you to move out the way. You're zigzag, and I don't care what environment you're in, wherever the power is. If you are a woman working in an environment with people who look like you, but they're all men, there is a zigzag that must occur. You go into a different, okay? So it's not just a black-white thing, although there is that, okay? But this is a power struggle. And there is a game, there's a level of game that you must be willing. There's a backpack of strength and courage that you must put on your back every day. And there's got to be that in touch with the spirit of your ancestors that gives you the drive to go through and break through. And yes, you are going to be challenged. You're going to be knocked down. You can be all those things. But you just got to get back up, because I think we're all playing the same game.
Can I add one little thing?
Yeah, please.
When I first got into the ad industry, I had someone tell me like, hey, look, you know, yeah, I know, because I used to work in the music industry in New York for a little bit. And they're like, yeah, I know, you know, all these like Black artists and Black directors and all this stuff, but you don't want to be the producer that is known for just bringing like Black directors and Black artists. And I was like, yo, like, that's so crazy. Like, I'm bringing you the best freaking talent. Like, that's number one. But that, it really, like, this question made me think about that, because regardless of what industry you're in that way, you're saying you don't want to be that Black person, right? You don't want to be that person. And I think that we can, you just have to do you, and if you being that Black person, whatever that means, offends someone, but you're doing that best work, you're killing the game. Either they're going to move out the way, or you're going to find another place to be, because you're unstoppable in that way. And I just, like, this conversation.
And really, what does that Black person mean? I'm that Black person. I'm that woman. I'm that mother. I'm that, all that. Okay. Because as long as you try and prevent me from getting what it is I want, I'm going to be that. And then some.
Right.
So I was really moved by a post I saw earlier this week, and I posted it on my own social. And it literally just says, write your own permission slip.
Absolutely.
Write your own permission slip, right? I love the motivation that both of you ladies brought from your experience in the space that you've imparted on the person who asked the question. And I think we can all gather that and take it forward into how we show up authentically and bring what we see happening forward in our companies. Yeah. So I hate to say this, it is already, I was going to say 4:45, but 7:45. We only have 15 minutes. And there's an important topic I know that we all want to touch on, and that is human rights as a very important cornerstone of DE&I. And let's talk about it relative to how we show up and how you both show up in your workspaces, from your learned and lived experiences, as well as what you know has to be done on a human rights issue. So Ericka, I'm going to go to you first, if I could. And then Dani, let's talk a little bit about what that means and how it looks across the entire spectrum of DE&I.
Sure. Because we get that, right? We get that. Well, you're a Black woman. Are they giving all the D&I positions to Black women? And I think we are fairly well suited to be in this place, because when we want to talk about not underrepresented, but not represented would be the term to describe Black women in corporate America in a lot of spaces. We tend to come in last place. If you were to listen to everything from dating sites to us, I think we ranked, it was between Black women and Asian men who on dating sites were picked last. If you look at our numbers in corporate America, there's been, oh God, I forget the number, but let's just say now we have 3 Black women that have been CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, with Rosalind Brewer's new placement at Walgreens. So, so I think we are in a situation where, and Black women, time after time, consistently, historically, this isn't an opinion, this is the truth, these are facts. Continue to bring the nation back to its moral compass, i.e. Stacey Abrams, i.e. African-American women who showed up at the polls and who drove people to the polls, and therefore we are no longer under the, I can go on. But what does that mean when you're doing this type of work? How then are you able to, I think balance is the word they look for. Are you only looking to elevate other Black women and other Black people? And I think that's ludicrous. That's a ludicrous assessment. It reminds me, they used to always ask that of Obama. Are you the president of Black people? Or are you the president of the United States? And so when people are asking you to look at other things, oftentimes that can be a double bind situation where I have seen Black leaders go a little bit too far to the left, where they don't support other Black people for fear of being labeled, that they're only there to help the other Black people, or they go all the way to the right. And they are so hard, they become a natural gatekeeper. They become the natural, what they call it, spook at the door, where you can't come in. So I think there has to be some balance there. And I think as I'm very cognizant of that. Yes, when we look at all the numbers, if I were trying to lift up everyone and lift those numbers up, I would naturally start with making sure that there are opportunities and access for African-American women in corporate America, because we still only are at 1.4%. That's ridiculous. 1.4%, yet we're graduating at greater numbers. We have higher degrees at higher numbers because we're trying to get to that ceiling. We're trying to break the ceiling. I think human rights and humanity and humility are very personal traits. And so I think with everyone, there is an opportunity to be better every day, because I think we work very hard to be good people and to, train ourselves into recognizing that, there is oppression there's intersectionality of oppression and misrepresentation. So my take really is the fact that as a human and as someone who recognizes really what being oppressed looks like, I don't ever want to compare my oppression to another person's oppression. Oppression is oppression. It's not a game. But with that being said, I'm a professional and I am there to do a job. And Dr. Martin Luther King says it so beautifully when he talks about injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And that's real. And I think our lived experience truly denotes that and truly embodies how that is a statement of truth. And so I think the way in which I lead and carry on is I make sure that everybody is recognized and I support those who I can. But you best believe I have a love for the tribe of African-American Black women.
Right on. I feel like that deserves a right on. Listen, as the lead for diversity, equity, and inclusion for Edelman Chicago, I definitely come from a human rights POV, right? As well as Ericka, right? Because in our roles, we represent the entire office. And the beautiful thing is, like, even though we have employee network groups that are like, focused on particular cultures, like maybe one that's focused on our African-American or Afro diaspora group, one that's focused on LGBTQ plus, one that's focused on Latinx and more. There is so much intersectionality. And so much of what I end up and like programming for our office lies in those intersections, right? Because I'm a woman, I'm Black, I may be a lesbian, or I may be, non-binary, like there are so many intersections, and I think that's where life is. I think sometimes, almost like when you listen to the radio, it's like, are you R&B? Are you country? It's like, well, dang, what if I like all of it? You know what I mean? Like, what station is that? And I think that's the station of life. Like, to be honest, like we are not just one particular genre of something or the other. And while 2020 saw us really focus on the Black experience and what has been missing systemically throughout institutions for hundreds of years now, it makes me remember the poem First They Came, right? And so it's like, first they came for the socialists, I said nothing. First they came for this group and that group. So when you are silent when there is an affront to human justice and to humanity, that will eventually come to your door. And so it behooves us to stand up during this time, and even if it is a focus right now, right, on Black Americans, I have had, a couple clients say, well, what about everybody else? And I'm like, everyone else, this is about everybody. Because we're saying Black Lives Matter doesn't negate the value of other lives. It is focusing in on this issue that we have on police brutality and systemic racism. And we see that this is a time for brands to also remember that, yes, our Latinx community, yes, our Asian community, our LGBTQ plus community, our disabled communities, all face a variety of other discriminations and affronts to their humanity. And so I think that's where my heart is. I mean, my lived experiences as a Black woman. And so I can speak to that very easily. But there are definitely spaces I go into where I have to turn on my ears and I have to listen, because just because I have a Chicago Black woman experience doesn't mean that I know the Black experience as a transgender woman, or as a woman from another intersection of Blackness, or also other cultures. And so I think a lot of what the job is listening and continual learning, and leaning into the fact that, again, as it's been said many times, we are humans and we all deserve our rights.
I love that.
I want to pitch for this team anytime, man. I give you guys a great ball, and it may not even be a great ball, and you just hit it out of the ballpark. I want to try to squeeze in one more question, but we were given a great quote by a Facebook attendee that I want to share with everybody, and it reads, "Courage may be the most important of all virtues, because without it, one cannot practice any other virtues with consistency." And that is the great Maya Angelou. So please refer back to that when we're done here. But as we wrap up, I really want to use this last minute or two, if each of you would touch on how you will guide your brands, your clients, and your companies in 2021 to be authentic in this DE&I space, and how that might be different and how they showed up in 2020.
Do you want to go first, Dani?
Sure. When I'm working with brands, I really want to understand who they are in a space, right? Again, like, everybody's not Ben and Jerry's. You can't, they've put in the work, they put in the time to authentically show up the way that they do. And so just to put up a black square, or just to, say Black Lives Matter isn't enough. Just to give your employees Juneteenth off isn't enough. It's the way that you utilize who you are in the space that you're in to show up for the communities that you are serving, right? And or to explore other ways that you may have never even considered how to show up, right? So that authenticity really does start with understanding who you are as a company. What's your narrative? What do you stand for? What do you stand against? What will you not take, And this is very important, because I also want to avoid the clients that I work with falling into that pitfall of making public statements that they can't back up internally, right? And so ensuring that the statements that you make out in public are reflected internally, and that your internal stakeholders actually trust you and believe what you're saying, that they're actually getting the benefits that they deserve, that they feel that they're in a diverse space. And if it's not diverse enough, that that you're working on it, that they're getting an equitable experience. And if it's not there yet, you're attacking, pay equity, you're attacking other inequitable experiences, and that they're having an opportunity to thrive in a diverse and inclusive workplace, right? That they feel they belong there. So everyone's on a different place in the journey. Let's get real with where you are so that you can make progress.
Yeah. Everything that you just said, everything you just said, plus for me, I always start in the space of compassion. I want to know, what are people feeling? So I want to measure the feelings. I'm constantly measuring and surveying and talking, creating opportunities for other people to talk and be heard, because I want to know. Then we want to make sure that the commitment to, just like Dani said, the commitment isn't an empty commitment. The commitment is truly a commitment that from the CEO to the down to the mailroom, we are all on one accord. We might not all agree, but there's a commitment. And so the commitment must be that we do not accept racist ideologies within these walls, that we allow people to advance and clearly see the pathway to success. So those are commitments that we need to get people who are in those positions to make those commitments, and those popular systems. We're gonna work on that. We're gonna make that happen. And then
sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, the conviction. There's a conviction behind it. My conviction, which I said before, and which I think everyone pretty much gets at this point, is I'm very convicted behind what I'm doing. It is my purpose, and it is my passion. So I'm overseeing this thing, right? I'm making this thing happen, and I'm being consistent. So that message throughout that whole entire about conviction, compassion, and commitment is something that we now have to make sure that we do with consistency. And that is, however we try and do that is through many channels to different stakeholders within our company.
I love that. I love those C's, and I hope everybody jotted them down. But if they didn't, will you please share your social, or do you want people to find you on LinkedIn? And then Dani, if you would do the same.
LinkedIn is really good for me. And I think my LinkedIn is Ericka Riggs. I think it is. I think it is. Yeah. Okay. Made it simple. Ericka Riggs. And that's Ericka with a C and a K.
You can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Dani Jackson-Smith. And if you're on Instagram, it's at Miss Dani Jackson, MISS Dani Jackson. So yeah, either place.
Thank you, ladies. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Angela Bundrant Turner. And on Instagram, I'm Angela RBT. And I think I've got to give it back to you now, right, Yvette?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so inspired. This is the industry of my childhood, and it was so closed. To be honest, to walk into those agencies, and even today, it's a pretty cold thing when a Black person walks in to one of these large agencies often. Now, I know that's changing, but it's just an inspiration to know that you guys are leading, that you're leading at REVOLT TV. It's just a wonderful thing that Diddy is continuing to do. It's like punch, punch, punch for the culture, for the culture, for the culture, right? What a legacy he's leaving, and what a door he's opening with you leading the way, Angela. It's just wonderful. And you've done a wonderful job tonight for MOBE, marketing opportunities in business and entertainment. I think we've heard some opportunities. To Dani, you are our future. You're bringing kind of a light, a wind beneath our wings. For those of us who have been in the industry, we all have this music background, right? We have some music background, some entertainment industry background in us. And you spoke about your experience there as it's just a journey, and to know that you're leading, Dani, is such an inspiration. What you said tonight has really opened our eyes to what it's like to be a young woman leading in the industry. To us old veterans, and nobody's old as me on this. Let's just be clear. But to Ericka, who serves on our MOBE advisory and is so generous. And we talked about Renetta McCann. So I really want to thank Ericka for being here, for being for MOBE with so much time. You wouldn't even imagine what it takes to put these things together. And but I was thinking about Renetta, who we honored in the beginning. And surely what she said, what you've seen tonight, is really an expression of our culture, how we express ourselves, how we're not stuffy corporate executives. We're very down to earth, and we're very for the people. There is a movement within the ad agencies, right? A movement to make that pie bigger, to cut it correctly and fairly, and to recognize everybody, to look up with people in their face and let them know that, you know, they are important And basically, they're going to drive this business. So I love the title here. Okay. I really love the title. And, it's ride or die. You're going to ride with the culture or you're going to die. Or as Renetta McCann would say, culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. So if we are now being driven, this country has been driven by our culture and so many cultures. And it's a wonderful thing. And for those people that are close to it, they're not really going to survive. So you really opened up a pathway for us tonight to even have some insight into what's going on within your organizations and what kind of personalities are representing us. With that, I'm going to ask Rael, and again, every day this week, we're going to be, this is Women's History Month, and we decided that Black women who are leading, we just couldn't do one panel. We're doing something every single day this week. And I'm going to ask Rael to give us an idea of what to expect.
Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time will be Power Players Transforming Madison Avenue. Black women have a legendary history in the advertising industry. From the creation of the Pillsbury Doughboy to secrets strong enough for a man but made for a woman. Today, women are the leaders of the most influential advertising agencies. How will the disruption caused by the death of George Floyd shape the future of Black and multicultural agencies? Tomorrow will feature Kai Devereaux Lawson, Global Director, Talent Partnerships, WPP, McGee Williams-Osei, co-CEO of Burrell Communications Group, Monique L. Nelson, Chair and CEO of Uniworld Group, Tanisha Jackson-Warner, CEO of Igami, and Shantae Bacon-Cias, founder and CEO of 135 Agency. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please share with your friends and tell them what a wonderful conversation we are having here with MOBE, Women in Advertising Week, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.
Happy Women's History Month.
Happy Women's History Month.